So what you want to submit here is a working thesis. It's kind of the same principle of the bibliography, the first draft. It's a working bibliography. Everything that you turned in with that first assignment may not be the same as when you turn it in again in the final product. So your thesis, and this is going by some of the highlights that are in the textbook. It's a tentative statement. It's going to help you organize and plan your paper. This is the central point. This is the argument in your paper. Okay, you want to convince the readers, that you have an important thesis. You're not writing just for the sake of writing something with a very vague idea. Again, you want to prove something. You're presenting evidence that your research has uncovered. You are presenting an argument based on your mastery of the subject. And the evidence provides support for your thesis. Again, that doesn't mean that you throw out everything that counters your thesis. You can take that into consideration, but at the end of the day, you're going to say, look, my thesis is correct. I mean, others have made other points. That's why you always take in the idea of counter evidence when you are writing and putting together a research paper. So let's go through what a thesis should be and what it also should not be. A thesis is not a simple restatement of your topic or a summary of your research. Again, it's a claim that you're making. Again, this is an argument. The thesis is an argument. It's one that you're going to pursue in the essay, and you bring in evidence in your research, in your writing, that will support that thesis. Secondly, it can be refined. You can change it from what you turn in next week to your final thesis and your statement. You want to set it up early, too. You want to establish your thesis in your opening paragraphs. And a thesis is always the basis for when you do other historical writing. Whether or not you, let's say, make an argumentative essay in something as simple as an exam, or if you run into some writing when it comes to an admission essay of some kind for graduate school or law school, or why you want to convince someone that you are worthy of being accepted into a advanced degree and for anything else. You obviously want to frame everything around a thesis statement. History research takes a stand on an issue. As you are picking up the books that you research, especially your secondary sources, you're going to find that each author has a thesis. If it's a topic it seems to be covered ad nauseum, like forever and ever, and I don't know why we have to have another book on such and such a subject, that author is going to present his or her argument saying that, look, this is why my research is different, or my research has proven a different point from others. Everyone else got it wrong up to this point, and instead we should consider it this way. Here's why I make this argument. And that's why those authors and you are making an argument based on this evidence. So it's considerations of your point of view and your argument plus counter evidence. But you also want to say, hey, my thesis is strong. Again, you can't throw out what I suggest. Others have tried this, but I would say that this is the overall strongest set of reasons why I think my thesis is valid. And here in the paper is not a summary of what other people have said, but here's how I interpret it. And as the book makes clear, it's kind of like presenting, if you are an attorney, a case to a jury. You make an argument. Also here in this little outline, and I'm going to obviously put up as we talk, and also on Moodle, we will have an example of a thesis. We will also have an example of the outline. Benjamin, pages 105 to 109, some of which you've read before already, because again, you want to talk about this idea of a thesis and argumentative writing. Has relevant sections in it right there, 105 to 109. Okay, let's go down to the area on an outline. An outline is a way to put together the structure of your paper, and it might seem like one of those, oh, it's a silly exercise that we just have to turn in because it's a grade. No, I want really to see that you are thinking big picture, which you're going to have to do. We're at the midway point of this semester. You have a rough draft that's going to be due soon, followed by revisions, cleaning up your writing, honing in your argument some more and perfecting it, and then turning in a final draft. So an outline helps you organize your thoughts. You're already doing it, hopefully, with whatever method you are using to take notes, whether that be index cards of different sizes, whether that be individual files on a computer on the different sources that you have. And then you're putting it, and I hope you're keeping that all straight, because you want to make sure that when you do citations and when you paraphrase, and make sure you want to put the citations in there, you want to keep all of your sources straight. And when you have direct quotes from primary sources, you obviously want to put that in as well. Quoting word for word is going to require a footnote and endnote. And we will get to footnotes and endnotes as we get closer to the rough draft. Now, how to do them properly. And again, I don't really have a preference about which one you do. You have to do one or the other with a bibliography. So again, every assignment builds to your overall end of semester project, which is this original research paper. So you can write drafts of your outline, how I want to organize the paper, the different points you want to cover. All of that goes into the outline. Think about the kind of evidence that you want to utilize. And as I say here in this outline, think of it as a blueprint. You have now a structure or framework for the way you want to arrange your research paper, for the most effective way to back your thesis. Okay. So let's look at an example. And here is an example. Let's see if I can get this a little larger. It'll still work. Okay. We're going back to something I did as a project. Well, it's been a while now. It doesn't seem to be, but it's certainly one of the early projects I did after I started at NSU. It was an idea on a paper that was first presented at a historical conference. And it's a good example because conference papers usually run between 12 and 15 pages, so it's roughly the same length as a research paper you have to do. At a conference, you're going to have to do a presentation of 15 to 20 minutes, and that usually translates to anywhere from how quickly you read 10 to 15 pages. So again, the idea came from a secondary source, reading a book about Lincoln traveling and how Lincoln still is talked about, memorials, reenactors, how Lincoln still is around as a presence in the 21st century. So this is a quote from him when he sees a slave auction in New Orleans. He makes 2 trips there when he's fairly young. Now, there's some doubt about whether or not this actually happened. And so, again, my thesis was essentially that Lincoln, if he was and strongly anti-slavery at a relatively young age, it may have happened when he made those trips to New Orleans and he saw slave auctions. And people with him said, oh, this was his quote. He saw that. He was, again, disgusted by it, and he makes this quote, if I ever get a chance to hit that thing, I'll hit it hard, a reference to the institution of slavery. So where do you start? How do you organize it? And this is a very simple outline, everybody. This is, 9 different points, all A, B, C, 3 kind of areas within that. So we get into the background on Lincoln's trip. And so I open the paper with talking about this incident, where it started, what was the occasion for him going to New Orleans from Indiana and Illinois, and then what he saw and how the origin of the quote happens. Okay, then we backtrack. Okay, so the introduction and the thesis comes in that section 1 in the outline. Section 2 talks about, because there's a lot of Lincoln scholarship, early biographies about him. The idea that people who wrote about him, friends, folks who knew him, wrote biographies that may have been, again, incorrect. The whole story about Lincoln seeing this, the person who claims this happened, never went all the way down to New Orleans with Lincoln. So that brings up the whole validity of whether or not this happened. So we go and explore some early biographies of Abraham Lincoln. Then we talk about seen slavery as he was young, even before these two flatboat trips to New Orleans. And the fact that maybe his family left Kentucky for reasons to get away from slavery. That's always been a theory about Lincoln's father, at least. So we go into the two different flatboat trips, 1828 and 1831. So again, this is someone who's in his late teens, early 20s at this point. Talk a little bit about New Orleans. Obviously, if it's his destination, we have to discuss why it's significant in the American slave trade and the importance of New Orleans and Louisiana during the antebellum period. Then from there, we attack and challenge this idea of the John Hanks story that Lincoln actually, did he see a slave market? This is still up in the air. He may have, he may not have. And so this kind of enters this Lincoln mythology. People around him say, look, I want to establish, think about it. What are the motives of biographers? They want to establish that Abraham Lincoln, who just was assassinated, he's a martyr, he's the last casualty of the Civil War. We, his friends and people who knew him, want to establish that he had anti-slavery bona fides early on, like 18, 21 years old. Then we explore in section 6 here the truth about the quote. And we talk about that early biographies did mention the incident. Others left it out because, again, you need a couple witnesses to make it an actual quote attributed to Lincoln. Then we go into a little bit about Lincoln's background, something he was not very proud of when he discussed it with others. He, again, wrote a very short biography for a campaign, and it didn't even mention the incident. Then we get into Lincoln's what I call tangible anti-slavery stands, where he has on paper where he spoke out against it. And so those are a few incidents. And then, of course, we tie everything back in the last section with the why. Why there was an effort to create this story in the Lincoln literature. And the fact that some modern biographers still say, look, we've got to look at it. I don't think it's an actual story. I know he went there, but whether or not he said that and was thought the whole practice was abhorrent to him, we don't know. So that's where we evaluate it. And so this is, again, coming full circle with the start of the paper, which said, let's look at that trip, then let's return to it, and why it has to be in some ways addressed, meaning even if historians kind of don't think it really happened that way, they should look at it in the whole Lincoln biography, whether or not you believe it or not. So if you dismiss it, you want to say, look, if he did have these strong anti-slavery feelings, when did they develop? If they developed at all before his presidency. So that's part of where you consider the evidence. That's why you have primary sources. That's why your evidence always has to be questioned. Again, no one else mentioned that Lincoln said that quote, and the person who did wasn't there all the way there to the New Orleans trip. So that's why the evidence has been questioned, but it's part of the whole story. So that was the end result there, kind of tying everything together, the greater meaning of Lincoln's travel, and that this story must be in some ways addressed by historians. So this is the outline. Again, I put this together afterwards because everyone kind of organizes it differently, but I wanted to show you what your outline should look like. Again, very simple, major points with your ABC. You don't have to Roman numeral. Yeah, you can do it that way and it's all fine. So I hope this helps. This certainly is going to be the way that you need to address this assignment and then submit it next Wednesday.